Hey folks, welcome to episode 1 of season 1. We don't need no fact checked education. A lot of people think, hey, you know what? Education is the answer. But according to Dr. Nassim Taleb, he says it's not education that improves the standard of living, it's the other way around. Improved standards of living are going to improve education. And for me, as a PhD in education, I have to agree. So let's get down to it. Empowering education. Okay, so that is education that empowers and is based on truth and not political agenda is a wonderful thing. And yet, somehow it seems so far away from what we have. That is government sponsored propaganda machines. In other words, or as they are alternatively known as, K-12 and modern day university. So we don't really have an education system. What we really have is a schooling system. So what do I mean by that? Well, schooling is actually an institutionalized indoctrination system where the ideologies which come from the symbolic elite are propagated and forced upon students, and the ideologies are being passed off as facts. Okay, while education, on the other hand, refers to acquiring knowledge, not ideology. And acquiring that knowledge can be formal or informal. So you could go to school and get an education, okay, but public schools do not provide education, they provide schooling. You see the difference? All right, so let's keep going. Now, in order to understand why public schools do not give us education, but they rather give us schooling, is to understand curriculum. This concept known as curriculum. You know, we hear, oh, the curriculum this, and we're mad about the curriculum, we need to improve the curriculum. Okay, well, what is a curriculum? Well, we think about curriculum as simply the stuff that we teach at school. That the content, right? The standards, the expectations. But according to educational philosopher Doyle, he explains that, yeah, curriculum does refer to that stuff or the content of schooling, but it also refers to knowledge, methodologies, and dispositions that constitute the experiences and the outcomes of schooling. Aha, you see, schooling, not of education. Okay, because it is institutionalized and it is based on ideology. And therefore, Doyle explains that curriculum is not simply content, but a theory of content. You see? So it is talking about how the symbolic elite, they force upon us their ontology, or at least an ontology that they want us to adopt. What does ontology mean? Ontology means the way you view reality. Like, do you think that there's one objective reality and we are all seeing it from different subjective points of view? Or do you think that there are no realities and many different realities according to each person's lived experience, or many other different ways of thinking of the world? But I'm just giving you two really easy ones to explain right now. So there are ontologies, and you can think of ontologies as branching into certain paradigms or certain epistemologies, right? The way people think that they know what they know and what knowledge is. And so you would come across perhaps things like social constructivism, that is, everything is just a social construct. You might come across some things like humanism, or you might come across like Plato's idealism. Okay, so these would be what you could consider ontology, or what you believe, or how you believe the world to be, or what reality is and how it works. And so the institutional curriculum would be that ontology, which, like a specific ontology, which you might not believe in, but the symbolic elite have an ontology which regulates and controls everything that's going to be in the content of the curriculum. Okay, so it is going to shape everything that is taught in the curriculum and everything that the student receives at school. And so for this reason, we're not actually getting an education, we're getting a schooling experience. Okay, so now according to Doyle, there are 3 levels of curricula. 1, the institutional, which is at the top of the pyramid. 2 is the programmatic or the official curriculum. And 3 is the classroom, which is the lived experience curriculum. So the ones that the students actually feel, the practical, the implementation of the official curriculum. All right, so let's start at the top of the triangle of our hierarchy of curriculum. Okay, so at the top is the institutional curriculum. It embodies a belief system of what public schooling should be. Okay, so what should public schooling do for the students and do to the students? And what should students look and act like when they leave the public schooling system? And these beliefs, which shape the curriculum, are communicated through policy discourse. Okay, so through policy. Now, we must understand that when institutional curriculum is planned, it is always a political undertaking. Okay, it is never neutral. So to think that education or schooling is apolitical is really just to dupe and deceive yourself, and there is no reason to do that. Public education, I should say, public education is 100% political, and if it aligns with your political ideals, then you won't mind. But for the large amount of people whose interests are not served, and a lot of them are just unaware that it's not serving them because they drank the Kool-Aid. For the majority of people for whom the institutional curriculum does not serve, it really is an oppressive mechanism that is designed to take away your liberty, your free livelihoods, and your creativity and your critical thinking. All right, so as I mentioned, a programmatic curriculum, which is the written curriculum, right? The curriculum that uses the policies and then, writes down the standards and expectations. These are all based on the belief system of the institutional curriculum, not on the belief system that you and your family have, or that you want your child to have, or that you want your community to have, but what the highest level of government, whoever's in charge of your public school education, whatever they believe is best for you, without even knowing who you are, of course. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about the classroom curriculum, but I do want to talk about like the institutional and the official curriculum, which would be the programmatic curriculum. So the programmatic curriculum is a regulative mechanism. Okay, so it is going to say what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. So it's based on a value matrix. Again, not what you value, not your values, but what the values are of the symbolic elite, whose purpose is to maintain their power, not to enlighten or empower you. All right. Curriculum is absolutely governed by political and corporate interests. And if you don't know that, I really don't know how to help you. So, for example, in America, you can see how IBM or Apple or Microsoft, how they have deals with the education system, and same with the textbook companies. So they have government subsidies, they have government deals, and of course when the government is involved, then there's a level of absolute corruption and propaganda, and of course that these corporations also want what's in their best interest. So basically you have the government interest, the corporate interest, and really when you get down to it, government and corporations actually belong to even a greater institution above them, and I'll break down the structure of social architecture in another episode, but you will see that it's like public school is based on the values and interest of everyone and everything other than the people it is supposedly meant to serve. So it's based on the values of everybody except for the students. Now, the conceptualization of students in the programmatic and the institutional curriculum is never taken in. The actual needs and supports that students have are never really taken into consideration. Rather, the institutional curriculum conceptualizes what students need. So they will define and tell you what you need. Okay? And in this way, they can reproduce certain social outcomes. Okay? And we all know that some corporations are above the law and that education systems help justify these imbalances by reproducing the structures that allow these corporations to be, in fact, above the law. So now that we know that education systems are indeed political, we must be critical about the issues around education and the issues that people harp about. Maybe you don't really consider them issues, and you should also be really wary of any solutions that people impose or try to get you to accept, because a lot of people use public school as kind of like, it's not just a prison, but it's kind of like a closed area vacuum where people, they know that you're in captivity and there's nowhere for you to go. So it's what a great way to come and preach your values or preach your desires or your spellcraft or whatever it is, to come and you have like 1,000 people in one building where you can just preach your doctrine, indoctrinate the people, and there's nowhere for them to go. It's very coercive. Where are they going to go? They're just kind of stuck there. It's not their choice to listen to the verbiage, right? So in academia, for me, as someone who understood all the terrible things that is government schooling, and somebody who doesn't believe that government is the solution to anything, well, even though I do think that there is a role for government, but I don't think that government schooling is where we should do our social activism. I don't believe that. Like, my goodness, we have so many social justice warriors or whatever they call themselves who really think that because students are captive in their buildings, that this is a great way to infiltrate it and promote their social values, their ontologies, and their belief systems on these young minds who are coerced into being there. They don't even have the choice to be there. So that's really unethical. And yet, when I was doing my PhD in the academic environment with other academics, my goodness, I was the only one who felt that this was so unethical to, say, well, I really believe in this, and so we should teach students that, and we should, tell them about this. And, okay, well, maybe according to your ontology, that's okay. But when we get down to it, we really need to think, what is the purpose of education? Is it to make people literate and independent and free thinkers, or is it to mold them into certain types of people functioning in society in certain ways? And in my experience, according to the universities, it's the latter. It's all about socializing students to think and behave and adopt certain values upon graduating from their institutions. Okay, it's never about just enlightening students, giving them power and giving them free thought and free choice and free speech, and just to get them independent and getting them to be creative rather than destructive forces in the world. So listening to my colleagues about how we should indoctrinate students was like listening to a broken record. They threw around decontextualized terms like neoliberalism to explain all the evils of the education system and posed, what is it? More government control to force certain content into the curriculum that they deemed the best content for the young students of today. And anyone who dared disagree with the content that they wanted in the mandated curriculum, they were quickly labeled, you guessed it, a racist, a homophobe, an intolerant ignoramus, someone who just doesn't understand the moral high ground that they occupy. They never conceded the major flaws in their theories or the blatant inconsistencies in their own worldviews because they never stopped to think about, hey, maybe my ideas are not my own ideas. Maybe I'm just jumping on bandwagons, or maybe I'm just trying to project my values onto other people. They never stop to think about it. They're just, bandwagon jumpers, or they just drink the Kool-Aid or whatever their dealio is. And they certainly never gave a second thought to the way they demanded certain beliefs be ingrained in others. And they never ever considered, hey, maybe that forcing their beliefs down other people's throats is supposedly what they are fighting against. So, what it really comes down to is this: these people are not actually against indoctrination. They just want to be the ones doing the indoctrinating. And that's the difference between me and the rest of the majority of academia. I'm against indoctrination and forcing ideas on people, and I'm really about freedom and choice. Okay? And then when it comes to private schooling or local schooling, well, I really believe that the local community, and I'll talk about what community means in a different episode because that's also something that's really important. But the local community should be 100% in charge of what their curriculum is. Having a top-down curriculum is so stupid for so many reasons. First of all, you don't know what the economic needs are of that community. You don't know, what job training needs to be done. You don't know what skills need to be developed. You don't know what their ontology is, what their religious beliefs are, what their anti-religious beliefs are, what their political, you don't know. And not only do these top-down officials not know, they don't care to know because, again, their job is not to create empowered, independent, creative beings, but rather to create homogeneity across the board, which is, of course, something that makes controlling people a lot more easy. So, as I said, when it comes down to it, the people who go around yelling and screaming about, I have been wronged or I am a victim of this, they are actually not against indoctrination. They just want to be the ones who are doing it. Now, these people, these loudmouths, are mostly unaware, most of them, I should say, are probably unaware of how they are perpetuating nonsense. And they probably are not even aware that they are victims of propaganda, not victims of, let's say, unfair policy, or I don't even know what the heck that they're fighting against. Okay, but they're really definitely, if they're going to be victims, they're victims of propaganda. And I found that, like so many other false narratives, the story is being told, or the false narratives are being told by two groups of people. And as I said, most people, whatever group that they might fit in, they are unaware of the role in the propaganda. Okay, so the majority of people do not know that they're being duped, and then there's a really small group of people who know that it's BS, but they propagate it anyway. So basically, we have two groups. One, the people who have drank the Kool-Aid, and two, those who serve the Kool-Aid. Now, of course, we don't belong to either group because we don't, propagate the BS, right? So we belong to a different group, those who have nothing to do with the Kool-Aid. So let's talk about these two groups who propagate the grand illusions, okay? So let's look at group one first, the people who drink the Kool-Aid. Okay, these are the people who believe anything they hear if it is A, packaged in a pretty bow, B, delivered by some good-looking or famous person, and C, it promises to make them feel like they are standing on the moral high ground. When people accept these false narratives, it is not because they are trying to spread misinformation. It's simply because they don't think that the Kool-Aid delivery guy could sell them crappy Kool-Aid, or Kool-Aid laced with cyanide. So in other words, these people who drink the Kool-Aid, they don't question the content of what they hear. They do not question the information that they are being given. Rather, what do? They just try to feel or discern how the source makes them feel. Like, did the delivery dude make them feel special in some way? You know, did they deliver it in a pretty package? You know, something like that. So it really is an emotional decision to drink the Kool-Aid. Okay, well, you know what? Maybe I should explain this whole Kool-Aid reference. Maybe people don't know what I'm talking about. So there was this like cult leader. His name was Jim Jones, and he used like this fruit flavored drink, and he got people to basically drink it and commit mass suicide. So now I found like something really funny actually, that this dude Jim Jones, he used something called Flavor Aid, not actually Kool-Aid, but the saying now starts, don't drink the Kool-Aid or something like that. People still use the word Kool-Aid, even though it was Flavor Aid. Okay. So the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid refers to how people just follow blindly, which is a huge problem, not just in cults, but in the mass society. Okay, it's society at large. And this dude, Jim Jones, what he did was he laced this drink with cyanide, and part of his cult, I guess it was called the People's Temple, he got 900 people to drink this Kool-Aid, and of course they all died. All right, anyway, so that's why I say, don't drink the Kool-Aid, because, it just means that you are a follower, and a blind follower, and you're not using your faculty of reason or any kind of criticality. So anyway, what does all of this mean for us today? Well, most people are taught to shy away from time-honored texts that could actually help us stay away from Kool-Aid and the cult thinking and the group ways of thinking, okay? So people are taught to shy away from time-honored texts, or, you could call them collection of knowledges that have withstood the test of time. And we are taught to thus deny that human nature exists. Because without looking at the time-honored texts, those texts that have survived thousands of years, you are not understanding the patterns, the cycles, the psychology of humans that is so vital to understanding life today. Instead, what we are taught is to prop up pseudoscience and jump on bandwagons, to throw out the time-honored text, and in favor pick up those trendy articles and catchy sound bites and share those viral, terrible social media memes. Now, for me, as a scientifically grounded academic, I work using texts, and I certainly do not carelessly throw out texts just because they haven't been peer-reviewed and published in a mainstream academic journal. And that is a huge lesson to learn. Learn from everything and everyone you can. Some things are trash and other things are treasures, but you don't know unless you try to learn from them. Falling into the trap of believing only that which is fact-checked by supposed unbiased fact-checkers who are bought and paid for by the institutions that they fact-checked is a most disempowering and deceitful way to live. We, as conscious and truth-thirsty spirits, shy not from time-honored texts, and we shy not from exploring the world around us. Again, I started off this episode with Dr. Nassim Taleb, and I'm going to talk about him again. He calls those things, those ideas that stand the test of time, a result of the Lindy effect. And he says there is much value and knowledge in things and ideas that withstand the test of time. Okay? And he also says that we should be careful when we look at theories, because he says that your grandmother's advice, okay, which has withstood the test of time, is superior to what you get in a course at university, which is going to change from year to year. Whereas your grandma's advice stays with you forever, and you're going to pass it down to your children, so on and so forth. So Nassim Taleb says that it's not true that the best ideas survive. He's saying that it is the best salesman of those ideas that survived. And you can read some of Nassim Taleb's books that I really enjoyed. One of them was called The Black Swan. It's not that Hollywood movie. It's called The Black Swan, and I think that it was one of the most influential books since World War II or something like that. Anyway, if you want more information on the Lindy effect and time-honored texts and time-honored knowledge that help us understand today's psychology in today's world, I definitely recommend that book. But for now, let's just talk about this. We understand that the majority of people fail to question the content of the information. Instead, they choose to rely on their feelings towards the source of information. Okay, so it's not about the information, it's about who told me. And what's the problem with that? Well, by no metric in the world is it a rational decision to just look at the source of information and then be able to conclude whether the information itself is reliable. Thinking this way is passive, lazy, unscientific, and a symptom of intellectual necrosis. An alert person would know that the information is far more important than the source. A critical thinker would use reason to question and analyze both the content and the source. And this protects the critical thinking from dangerous ideas or from believing and adopting dangerous ideas that would leave them nothing but a corpse holding an empty glass of Kool-Aid. Okay. I just want to stress that yes, we should evaluate the source, but the information must be judged first before the source. Okay? Once the information itself has been evaluated as reasonable, then you can go on to the source and analyze it to see, okay, what is the agenda if there is one, and you can cross-check what you found in the information and what you find about the source. Of course, I can go over this method in detail, but all of it is in the book, The Voodoo They Do on You, by yours truly, Dr. Susan. But for now, let us understand that the source cannot be depended on solely, even if it has been deemed by people we don't know as reliable. And there are a number of reasons why relying on sources to deliver truth is a dangerous way to go about life. Number one, sources can make mistakes. So they can make mistakes. So, you say like, I've been reading this newspaper for 10 years and it seems to be reliable. Therefore, everything that appears in this newspaper is going to be reliable. Well, guess what? That newspaper can make an honest mistake. And if you don't question the content of what you're reading, you are going to fall for that mistake. It could be an expensive mistake. Let's say they made a mistake reporting on the stock market or about a company and you invested in it. It was a bad investment and, they made a mistake. Okay, or you can say there was a source who believed in, the reasons for going to war, whatever, and then so you voted for the war, and then, the news read, oh, sorry, we made a mistake. It was, we found a source who lied to us, but we believed their lies. We published it in the newspaper, then you believed it, and then, oh no, now we went to war, we killed millions of people, i.e. the Vietnam War, i.e. every war, let's just be real. Okay, number two, some sources can gain your trust on purpose by giving you true information, only to shoot you in the bum once they've earned your trust. Okay, so once they have earned your trust, they start inserting false information on purpose. So unlike number one, where people can make honest mistakes, some people actually make misinformation on purpose, and we call this disinformation. Okay, so when you perpetuate information that is wrong and it's unknowing, we call that misinformation. But when you perpetuate information that is wrong and you know that it is wrong, this is called disinformation. So be aware of sources that keep reminding you to trust them, like trying to equate the term trust in God, but then they want to kind of be like trust in us, and so they just keep reminding you, trust CNN. Okay, that's a terrible James Earl Jones, but just be really wary of James Earl Jones types commanding you to trust a certain station like CNN or whatever. All right, number 3, sources can be propped up by the system if they have connections to people in high places. So sources can look really legit only because they are in positions of power, and power always looks credible because you're saying, oh, well, how did they get into power? Well, they must have gotten to power because what they're doing is right. Otherwise, they would have been outed a long time ago and never gotten to that position where they are now. Okay, so people don't realize that a really crappy source can be propped up if they know people in high places. Okay, it's kind of like your really slow cousin who gets a good job just because your cousin's, I don't know, wife's dad owns the company. I don't know, something like that. Okay, not only that. Okay. You can see that things like fancy awards and testimonies can be garnered from their crony relationships, right? So you'd be like, I'm really a crappy source, but maybe if you give me a testimony, people won't know I'm crappy. And if I get a testimony from somebody who's high profile, then people will, really believe in what I'm doing and what I'm saying. And we also see things like peer-reviewed articles being more reliable just by dint of them being peer-reviewed. So people say, well, this article is more reliable because it's been peer-reviewed than this article, which hasn't been peer. You know what? We have the faculty of reason and the ability to discern for ourselves whether or not the information is reliable. Basically, when something is peer-reviewed, it just means somebody else told you that it's reliable. Well, what makes them better than you in deciding it's reliable or not, right? Just remember that. You know, too, not just other people. Why do we always think that other people know better than us? Other people have the wisdom that we don't. Other people have abilities and we don't. No, we are capable and we have potential and we have all of the gifts that they have. We have it. We just have been taught not to use them. And we've been taught that we don't have them, which is all false. Garbage, garbage, garbage. We are powerful. All right? So, things like being peer-reviewed is really a gatekeeping tactic to keep certain ideas unpublished in certain journals. Those certain journals then claim to be the definitive authorities on knowledge since they have so many gatekeeping measures in place, right? So peer-reviewed criteria has become a way of censorship rather than quality assurance. And there is nothing trustworthy about that. All right, number 4, some sources are developed by charlatans. Yes, charlatans are not a thing of the past. They are ever present on social media. Oh my God, how sickening. And they proclaim themselves as public figures and they manipulate people into thinking that they are unbiased truth seekers, helping you reach your, spirituality or your moral high ground on everything. But what in effect are they doing? They're actually buying their credibility through what? Internet marketing, which we know is a bunch of deception, right? Paid reviews. So they'll go around bribing and paying people to give them 5 out of 5 reviews, 5 out of 5 star reviews. They'll purchase website traffic. They'll hack SEO techniques, whereas maybe other people who have good information just don't know how to do those things, and thus they're not going to be searchable or findable or whatever. Okay, these charlatans can afford expensive advertising sometimes, and of course they are masters of endless self-promotion. So again, what do we have here? It's not quality information, it's not truth, but rather it is a bunch of charlatans being able to use sales tactics and marketing tactics. And so this goes back to what Nassim Taleb was saying. It's about good ideas don't survive. It's the salesman, that really help certain ideas survive. Now, that's not to say that no good ideas survive. Of course, there's time-honored texts, and it's our choice whether or not we want to use them as sources of information or not. But the cool thing is that a lot of these sources of information that academia tries to belittle or demean, they're still alive and kicking, right? So it's pretty cool. Now, I'll do an episode on charlatans and how they operate, like specifically what they do, their psychological tricks and manipulation, and why they are so successful at deceiving people. Um, and of course, I will have a complete chapter with all of the step by steps in the book, The Voodoo They Do on You, which will be released pretty soon. So keep your eye out on for that. All right, number 5, the final reason that I want to talk about why sources should not be the only thing that you look at when you want to find information or believe something. Okay, so the 5th reason is that it is not easy to evaluate sources. So you cannot just say, oh, I evaluated the source and the source checked out, therefore the info is reliable. And again, it is easier to evaluate the information than to evaluate the source. Okay, so let's just think about this. When somebody looks to see if a source is credible or not, what they actually do is see if other people think it is credible or not. Okay, well now it's just like getting more and more diluted and more removed. So now you have to believe this person who believes that this person is believable. And so it just gets really ridiculous. And remember when we were taught that Wikipedia was unreliable? And then what happened? A few years later, they told us, hey, guess what? Wikipedia is reliable. Okay, so there seems to be like some central invisible authority that dictates to us what sources are and are not reliable. So when people say they only rely on credible sources, what they really mean is they only rely on sources that some unknown source tells them is reliable. And I ask you, is that a reasonable way to evaluate information? Of course not. We don't need a fact checked education, people. What we do need is critical thinking and the knowledge that we are capable of discerning right from wrong on our own. We have gifts, we have our innate faculty of reasoning, which trumps everything. Schooling should not tell us what is or is not right for us. Rather, it should provide opportunities for us to explore what could be and what is right on our own terms. Education should be about teaching us how to use our reason, not to adopt prepackaged ideologies that serve everyone but us. All right, that's all for today, folks. Thank you so much for joining me. Remember to visit me on my website, firstinclass.ca, where I'm going to start putting up some photos because I think that will be a lot of fun. And I have my blogs up there and a lot of cool bonus material up there. So I thank you and I'm wishing you a pleasant day.